Hello and welcome everybody to the New York City PowerShell user group, the virtual online meeting. My name is Doug Fink. I'll be your host, and looking very much forward to Pipelines in a Nutshell by Fred Weinmann. Should be a very interesting talk. And before we kick off, just want to take your attention to next month. We have Michael Seidel, he's the CEO of Automator. He'll be joining us and to talk about his automated product, a self-service portal for PowerShell. And I have more speakers in the pipeline. We'll have somebody for May and on. So make sure you check back at the meetup, see who you want to come and see. So also on my new YouTube channel, just want to mention that here's a catalog of the last number of speakers I've had. And you want to head over there and subscribe and hit the notification button so you can be notified when I post new videos from the meetup. I also post videos about PowerShell and different topics, different ideas. You get notified of that as well. So 1 second. Okay, so with that, I'm very excited to introduce Fred. Fred is a customer engineer at Microsoft, bringing security and automation to customers. In his spare time, he does more PowerShell, reads, writes, plays strategy games, mixes cocktails, and brags about the toys that he builds in PowerShell. And he's here tonight to talk about one of those toys. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this in play. He likes productivity. And I like using tools that are productive, so this should be a win-win for pretty much everybody. So with that, Fred.
Yes.
I'll kick it over to you and share your screen and off you go. Everybody, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And I'll also be posting the link to the YouTube channel if you want to subscribe and so on. Okay, Fred, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you for joining us today, and let's get this rolling. About the question thing, just a quick warning, I have a single screen. I'm not going to see anything in writing. So Duke, if you could pick up any questions as they come in, or if anybody wants to himself for that, I don't care. Either way, you can interrupt me at any given time. It's not going to fluster me out of my presentation. So
sounds good.
Feel free to ask anything as it happens. All right, I'm Fred. I work as customer engineer at Microsoft doing all of these automation bits and things, especially related to security. You can find me on Twitter and my treasure trove on GitHub. I am somewhat prolific there. If you want to look me up there, I do have a lot of organizations, not just repositories. So if you only check the repositories, odds are you're going to be missing out on some of the best bits. All right. I also have 2 projects that are large enough to actually deserve their own website. So if you look into more on my PSModuleDevelopment project, which is my scripting infrastructure and tooling suite, some of that is what you're going to see today. You can find more on psframework.org. If Active Directory is your thing, I also have an Active Directory related project, Active Directory Management Framework, putting your Active Directory into source control. You can either check out the website or join us this summer at the PSConf EU in Vienna. And they'll be bragging about that particular toy in front of the audience physically and on site. All right, let's take a look at the main problem that I try to solve and I'm going to present today. One of the key things about being productive for me has been being able to automate things. Now, default commands are nice, but the next level of automation really came with all of the CI/CD pipelines, with Azure DevOps, with Azure, with GitHub Actions. They changed the way that I work. They really fundamentally transformed the way I code in a way I cannot overstate. It introduced the habit of having tests for my code, not always very specific unit tests, but at least general code quality tests. which I would never have done before that, because doing the manual testing every single time would have been too much of an effort for me. The pipelines, I just send my code, and when it's done, it's released, and a new module is in the gallery and win. All I had to do was like save my file, commit, push, and wait until it happens. So those pipelines, they are great. They have, however, one limitation, and that is the time delay. I trigger something, the container is being spun up. I'm not exactly going to pay big bucks for my free projects that I share with the community at large. I mean, I don't get throttled or limited in the number of runs for my public projects. That's nice by now. It's really great. But there is a significant delay until it happens. When I'm doing things fire and forget, like save my module ready to release, which I just did, by the way, and fire it off into the internet, into the pipelines, then I don't care whether I need to wait 1 minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes until it's released, as long as I don't have to watch it. However, there are situations where time delay has been a major problem, and also where actually I want to run that code on my machine. And I'm not going to turn my own workplace device into Azure DevOps agents. I mean, I could do that. It would work, but it would be slightly less optimal. And I'd still be stuck with time delays until I get things done, and more limitations and working around. So I decided, I thought, that's nice that we have these tools, but how can I build something that works for me, that gives me the same elements, the same features, functionality benefit of hitting a button and having things happen, only having them happen on my machine or whatever the current machine is in my PowerShell process, and well, getting that code deployed or whatever I want to automate that way. There is a second requirement that I wanted, and that one is also important. One of the great benefits of Azure DevOps pipelines, of GitHub Actions, is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. I mean, yes, I can just attach some scripts to my pipeline and that's it, write all the action that's happening myself. However, both services do have a marketplace with lots of predefined actions and logic building blocks that I can just plug in and benefit, profit, just like that. So that's what I wanted, and that's what I built inside of the PowerShell module, PSModuleDevelopment. I'm not going to run this. It's obviously already available on my box, but if you want the tools that you're seeing today, it's all in that PowerShell module. That's my general coding tools module. So you'll find lots of other things, my templating engine, code analysis, code refactoring, or messing with the type system or whatever else I deemed useful for development tools. It's all in there. So wouldn't it be nice if we could now just create our pipeline and get things running? Now, in order to set up some action, we probably should find out first what kind of actions are available. It ships with quite a few out of the box. For example, we can establish a new PowerShell session somewhere. We can remove that again. We can execute a script file in a target session. Can copy items, remove them. We can deploy PowerShell modules. This is something I am using quite a lot with execute a command. And this is, of course, fully extensible. So building your own actions is absolutely encouraged and possible. Okay, let's create a new project. The whole thing lives in a case in the build project. You don't have to build it by command line. It's just an accelerator for me because I keep forgetting about that, about the exact syntax until I look it up. all it really needs is a name. Oh, let's go with demo. And I'm going to set this up here to figure out. And of course, I keep forgetting what exactly I named these commands. I really need to rename that one, because that should not be a command I need to look up by command line. All right. Pipeline consists of several steps, as many as I want them to be. And I can pre-provision them the name. All of them need a name. Let's call it next start. I need to specify the kind of action that I want to do. In this case, I'm going to specify a command. And I can add dependencies that the previous command needs to have been successful. I can also specify a wait to assign the order in which they're being processed, because they're not necessarily in the order that we define them in. But what we really need to have is parameters. Now, what does the command build action actually require? Let's see. Get PSMD build action. Okay, it supports in session if I want to, but the only thing I really need to specify is an actual command. Setting up the first step. Second. And the last one. What we'll be able to see here is now a JSON file with all of the individual steps. This system supports both JSON and PSD1 files, so you don't have to generate them hard in JSON, but if you auto-generate them using the command set, it's going to use JSON because that's easier to generate.
Hey, Fred, is there like music playing in the background or?
Oh, actually, there is. I totally forgot about that. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
That's going to be gone in a moment. All right. Now, the wait is kind of something we want to do after all. So let's add in a wait to represent that order. I've added it to the file as well, but that way we also have it in the document. If there's a way to share documents after the session, I'll be happy to share that presentation script here so you can refer to it later on.
Yeah, and I'll post that on when I post the video. That'd be great.
All right. We have now configured the pipeline, and all we really need to do then is we just need to invoke it. Let's increase the screen size here a little bit and do it again. It now executed each step, and after the fact showed us a result of how it all worked out. Now, this is okay-ish, I suppose, but this is not yet quite convenient enough. What we can also do is, first of all, we can register something. Anybody who's familiar with my usual code would probably be, actually no, that again, I messed up my memory. Okay, sorry about the confusion here. I have more tools around making this more convenient, because specifying everything with the path and with the path selected and the full name, that doesn't really work out. So what we can do instead is we can select a specific file, and we can also register that file. If you register it, it will remember that across multiple sessions. So if I have a development project that I need to build locally several times over the entire week, I register that project file, and I no longer need to do anything with that. Now, I'm just going to select it. And once I've got it selected, I can just run build. Build as an alias for invoke psmd build project. And it runs like this. Now, example for what I use that frequently, as in this is the main purpose, the main situation that I wanted to solve. I worked together with one of my customers on the project called Active Directory Management Framework, which is a very complex, large suite of PowerShell modules that need to be updated and published in combination, that need to be pushed to my development environment in combination, and I need to do it every single time. I need to do it without fail. I need it in a managed way, and before that, I would need to copy 5-6 folders manually over into my RDP session on the remote host, which of course I forgot to turn on. Sorry about that. So let's start those three. Okay, I would manually go there and copy over my module files into the host on which I want to deploy it. This lab environment, by the way, if you have never heard about it, check out automatedlab.org. It's a PowerShell project by two of my co-workers for automatic lab deployments. Lab like these 4 virtual machines, 2 forests, a certificate authority, pre-configured Active Directory domain is like less than this entire page worth of script code. Just spinning up a lab environment, tearing it down, recreating it. Yeah. So how does that look like for me? I've got a pipeline, and the config is quite straightforward. First of all, I establish a new connection using the new PSession action that requires a few parameters. Credential percent, project root percent is straight the path where the JSON file is at, or the PSD1 file. I specify the virtual machine that I want to connect to, and I give the session a name, which is the next real concept of the whole thing. How can individual steps communicate with each other? Any step can publish artifacts, and artifacts can be referenced later in the parameter section of any subsequent step. In this case, the next step has the action deploy module. It has a dependency. If the session establishing was not successful, it is going to skip the step because the dependency was not met. I publish 5 modules straight from my source repository. I just point at a module folder. It will go into the target machine, remove the previous versions of the module, copy over to the remote session the new source code, and I target the session specified like this. This will automatically inject the artifact named admin host, which happens to be a PSession object, which is exactly what we need. And once I'm done, I'm going to call the remove peer session action, which is going to disconnect every single session that has been enabled. And that also requires that the connection is succeeded. And this console is still configured to use it. So yep, connecting to the host, copying things over. You should be seeing a progress bar flashing. There it was. And with that, I'm done. So whenever I need to start a new test iteration on the remote host, all I really need to do is hit build. And as you can see, this whole thing took 20 seconds, 21, something on that order. And that time delay is still within expectations for me. Until I switched back into the session and prepared everything again, that's already over. All right. So what can we do with artifacts? What else is there that we can? First of all, we can reference them, as you saw here. We can also filter instead. So we could give all of the, we could establish multiple PowerShell sessions, give all of them artifact names that start with psession.something, and with that one filter, grab all of the PS sessions. This only works, of course, if the individual action supports multiple, if the parameter supports multiple values. In my case, the case of my actions, that works. We will be looking later into how to build our own actions. And if that action does not actually support this, well, you probably want to do some parameter validation, which I'm doing with all of my actions. So what else can we do? We can actually provide artifacts before the connection ever was established. For that, let's create a new build file. I'm just going to stick to JSON here. And I'm going to grab over my ADMF code. Only this time, I'm not specifying any credential path. I'm going to expect credentials, a credential object, which is another parameter on this. And I'm going to expect this under the cred artifact name. The session is going to again still create the admin host. On the other hand, I can also say, okay, I want here the VM name effect. And I'm going to switch over the second command. And instead of the module, we're going to add a command here. This is going to run in
I think you might have a misname there, a typo for on VM name up top.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, we have the artifact to the, I'm going to rename that to host because admin host is no longer precise. We are now going to run a command on the target machine, which is going to be write host It's just going to return the name of the server on which we were executing. And then we're going to disconnect all of the sessions. And copy path. And we can now invoke PSMD build that project and fire. Well, and here we have now the exception error that actually, well, nothing was specified, so unable to connect to it because we did not actually pre-provision. So how does that work? We publish a new build artifact, give it a name, and of course, I keep forgetting the names of my cred and VM name. And do this again for M name, and that one shall be ADMF admin host. And before that, I need to get the credentials. No, they totally don't make us use contours. Okay. Provide the artifacts and run it again. And oh, neither computer name or VM name specified. Let's see, there has to be some reason why that failed. And the plain reason is, by default, when we begin, we clean up any persistent artifacts from the previous run. So if we want to inherit the artifacts that are already available, we need to specify the parameters. The parameter that tells it to not throw away any pre-provisioned artifacts. Now that still doesn't work, now I'm getting confused. Okay, let's take a look at what the source code is actually doing. This is the way an action actually looks like as we implement it. We specified some metadata, the name of the action, a description, and the parameters that we support with some documentation, so a user actually doesn't have to look up the source code, and the actual script block that executes. You get access to the root path of where the build file is, the folder the build file is in, and the parameters that were provided to the action. So we provide the mname parameter, and then it failed here. Okay, let's try that again. And this time I'm going to run this in a console that I'm comfortable with. And actually use the one that works. That I'm going to set a breakpoint on a variable where it just now failed. Param new PS session should be quite unique. Param new PS session. And now we do have the actual parameters and the VM name. Is actually perfectly benevolent. And now it works. Well, almost. Okay, this is probably because the console here is not as a local admin. And yeah, because it's not running as local admin, it cannot resolve the virtual machine name because it would require local admin for the Hyper-V commandlets that actually execute this. So yeah, my fail here. Well, that did not quite work out as expected. Another thing that did not work out is the computer name that was returned. We do have a command, and I need to fix the parameter to actually be correct. As you can see, we did not get an error for wrong parameters. If you've got a typo there, it's just going to ignore the value or not use it. Saving that again. And clearing up the breakpoints. Okay, it apparently forgot about the artifacts. Yeah, because I'm deleting the artifacts at the end of the pipeline as well. So that didn't work out. Okay. Nothing better than a live demo to test all of the things you broke.
The demo gods are here tonight. I like it.
They have always been quite partial to me.
This is good, though, to watch you go through this. I like it. Go ahead.
All right. We do have in session specified, but it is not happy with me here. Okay. Artifact for parameter in session not found. Artifact for parameter in session not found. That happens when artifact object breaks, which happens when we iterate here over all in session objects, which should actually be perfectly fine. Okay, let's take a look at the next piece of code. Republish the artifacts, and I'm going to go ahead and also tell it to not delete the artifacts so I don't have to republish again and again and again. Okay, the breakpoint was most stolidly ignored. Why? Should have worked. Anyway, there we go. Artifact object, nothing in there. Actual parameters has an in session. And that is a PS session, which is kind of weird when you look at the code that we have here. Session input is empty. Well, this one does have all the values that it's supposed to have. I do love my riddles. Very enjoyable, usually. I must admit, I do prefer when they happen outside of demos to that degree.
So we got a question. How do you expand commandlet aliases in the terminal?
Oh, how do I turn a dir into a get child item? That is a key binding brought to you by PSutil. PSutil is my command line convenience toolkit, which you also find on the PS Framework project and psframework.org. And it introduces a few conveniences to your life. Amongst other things, it introduces effective if aliases that don't force you to type 3 letters for the most common command in PowerShell. It also introduces the key binding Shift-Alt-Q to expand aliases. It also, while we're on the topic, allows me with the Alt-W key binding to send the current line into my input history without executing it. And what does get command do anyway? Well, with F1, we get help.
That's pretty slick.
Or F7 for a proper searchable input history. Of course, with direct insertion into the current line.
That outgrid view only works on 5.1, right?
It works on 5.1. It also works on 7 or any other later versions that I've found so far. I am afraid I broke backwards compatibility to version 3.
Gotcha. Cool.
You might need to configure a few things for it to run on Linux smoothly, or 6.1 even on Windows.
Makes sense.
But then again, you probably wouldn't do that. The UI elements of the help doesn't work. You can switch via config option. You can switch that to instead open it in the browser. It also comes with something like this. Okay, that did not actually do what it was supposed to. And that one, what the hell? Okay, I'm not going to go down that far into the rabbit hole off topic.
Awesome.
Anyway, it also concerns when it works, conversion logic between different numeric formats or SID to NT or NT to SID. Yeah, whatever. Fred, stop. We've got other worries. The session iteration here did not work as expected. So we are now trying to get build artifact with the name session input, which is obviously not working. And what is the artifact name of the artifact that we registered? It is VM name. That one would theoretically work, but it's of course not what we want to do. Okay, key. I'm going to quit that here. In case you're wondering how I get my input history back, like through inline search, that is the default Control R key binding that works on every Windows PowerShell 5.1 or PowerShell 7. So that part you already have, no installation needed. Okay, now I actually managed to confuse myself. All right. Debugging 101, make sure that the code that you're fixing is actually the code that's running.
Yeah.
get PSMD build action, name, command, format list wildcard, and see whether it actually is. And it is not. It is not. This is actually the old version. I just fixed that and I forgot to reload it into the current session. Reloading it, and now I should be able to run this just fine. And now, because I re-imported the module, I need to republish the build artifacts. This time there is no avoiding that. And there we go.
Excellent recovery.
I can now grab the DC red instead. And I'm doing this all to a different virtual machine. And with that, if I want to tie this build system into something else, I can provide the values outside of the current code and have it run. That's nice. There is, however, one limitation. Every single piece of code that would, every artifact that we would be publishing this way, every artifact that we would be publishing this way has the limitation that it needs to be defined in the current process. If, however, we're using this in a multi-process system, such as an actual Azure DevOps pipeline, because there is nothing that prevents you from using this inside of an Azure DevOps pipeline or a GitHub action. And if you want to define the values from a completely different process, we need to have some way to pass through the information. And this is where the next option comes from the pipeline, and last real flexibility enhancer that I'm going to brag about here. And that is, I can also use the PS framework configuration system to provide values for parameters, not for artifacts, but for parameters itself. And that should have me first at least give you a quick insight into what the hell is the PS framework configuration system. Fundamentally, the PS framework configuration system is a kind of an options menu for your module. That's what it was designed for. You can have it just as an interactive thing that you run the set PSF config, change some value there. And modify it like this in memory. You can define these values by a registry. And if you then start a new process, it's going to be automatically read from there. Now, registry is a very, very Windows kind of thing, but it allows you to use the PS framework configuration system or provision values using group policy. It's a manageability enhancement for the classic admin. What we usually use more from a DevOps perspective is configuration files, JSON configuration files, which you can also provision automatically. You can export an existing setting into a JSON file. You can import it. And if you use register PSF config, and let's say I want to register this setting. This is a perfectly harmless setting. Don't worry about the specifics here. But what I can tell it that I actually want it in a local app data or a useful Linux equivalent. And then it will generate a JSON file that is automatically loaded and imported whenever PS framework is being imported on that machine. What that means from a pipeline perspective, you can have a previous PowerShell process register the values that you want to provide to the pipeline using register PSF config, and they will automatically be available for a setup. And how does that work? We first need to modify our setting. I'm going to hijack demo for this and modify what we're doing here. I'm going to actually not include any parameter at all. And the name here is processing. Now, what we need to do is I'm going to live define this here. What we need is the full name chain like this. And with that, we now specify the command. And now specify the command that I want to send to that. Yeah. And this pipeline and this process is still configured to use the demo step. And now I provided the values from configuration. Okay. And that's pretty much all to it from a everyday usability perspective. Now, what we want to do is set up the set of steps that we would require, that we want to reuse again and again. In my case, publishing to my own local virtual machine, which is why I have all of these steps focused around publishing my code there or running things in that remote virtual machine. Because both the command and the script file actions support in session as a parameter, so I can execute it in a remoting session that I pre-established. So yeah, how do we go about building our own actions, defining our own reusable building blocks for the pipeline? Well, we define action. We already looked into fundamentally how this whole thing looks, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. We also don't want to memorize too much. And let's be honest, we're using my developer toolkit. So maybe there is something in there that's going to help us with this. Because I also have a templating engine, which involves a lot of predefined templates for you to use. So if you need a PowerShell project or want to build your Azure function app or want to define your own build action, there might be a template already available out of the box. Okay, what are we going to do here? My creativity is not quite at the peak given the current hour, forgive me for being a bit plain here. And there we are. All right. Some input validation and here we go. Load up the action and it is now available in our demo build. And let me just go ahead, add it here. Actually, reasonable, I suppose. I might want to actually fix my implementation to use a sub expression here. because otherwise it is not going to interpret the name correctly. But let's try this again. Yeah. That's pretty much all you need to do if you want to extend your own pipeline with custom actions. Put it in a module that you import automatically, and you've got your own actions resource kit. I am also very open to pull requests if you have anything that you want to share with the world at large.
So does it make sense to work with this to like even do like a GitHub action locally, spinning up, you know, Docker images, etc., or is that, am I thinking about it wrong?
It's can you ask it again, please?
Sure, no problem. So I was thinking like, I see the word action and you mentioned GitHub Actions in Azure DevOps. So I was, and you know, doing all this thing locally instead of doing it as an agent. If I wanted to build like a GitHub action that I wanted, not a GitHub action, but something like a GitHub action. So would this be usable? Is it good to think about it like, okay, I want to spin up a Docker image, do a bunch of different things, have it maybe give it a Docker file. Would I want to use this approach, your system, to do that kind of stuff?
It would totally work that way. Yes.
Awesome. Do you have any templates for that?
For Docker files itself, no, not yet.
Okay.
But I do have I do have a way I go about deploying PowerShell in Docker. I have not yet put that together into a template you can invoke.
Cool, cool.
But it's reasonably simple. I can put that to the documentation at the end.
Okay, no, this is great. I just want to make sure I was like thinking down the right path and not gonna go down a rabbit hole myself and then see
what this also allows you to do is implement action logic that is fully transportable between different action runners. Let's say you are working with GitHub Actions and you want build your own action block native to GitHub Actions. That's great, but it only works in GitHub Actions. So you can't just copy paste it over to Azure DevOps pipelines and it works and expect it to work or at Bayer or whatever. This will obviously work anywhere where you can run PowerShell, as long as your code is not in conflict with the operating system that's running PowerShell.
Gotcha. Cool.
Windows APIs kind of don't work on Linux.
Right.
I wonder why.
Makes total sense. Interesting. I like it.
All right, there is one more thing, one last feature that I kind of need to mention, but before we go that, how are we on time?
Perfect. On time. Go any direction you like. Yep.
Do I have 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
30? You've got 15 minutes. That'd be great. If you want to go longer, that'd be fine. But 15, you have at least 15. Do you need more than that?
No, I don't. I was just wondering whether I would just mention this or actually demonstrate this feature. That last feature that's still kind of not mentioned. It's not that usual a feature, but since I had to implement that technology for another system of mine, I thought, you know what? Why the hell not? And that is, you can apply environment filters onto your action. For example, you could say this step is only running when we are on Windows, and this step is only running when we are on Linux.
Nice. Cool.
And you can, of course, define your own filter sets with your own custom environment conditions. This whole thing is a feature of the PS Framework filter set. When you look at psframework.org, my project site for that, there are 4 modules. 3 of them are really relevant for today. You've seen PSUtil for the command line experience, PSModuleDevelopment that implements the pipeline and that implements all the templating engine and the other tools that I bring. And PS Framework, PowerShell framework, is my scripting infrastructure that is designed for you to take an actual dependency on the code that you ship. It provides tooling such as logging the configuration system you just saw, dynamic tab completion, and a host of other features. We would probably need a day or two to go through over all of them. But one of the features that it has that we're using here is the filter system. The filter system is designed to allow us to dynamically define filter conditions. And for example, let's say I could provide something like this. It's a filter condition. Or no, you don't want that. The filter system is a way for you to make both of these expressions work without giving the user that is providing those filter strings code execution. I use that in the PS framework in order to be able to safely import configuration files of conditionals, where the configuration is data that should not be executed. And well, you can define your own. Okay, I managed to completely break down my console. Let's try this again. We do have a few predefined filter conditions. And yeah, they tell us what we can do. For example, let's go with the demo build. And what we have here is a condition set and a condition. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the hello action the condition that I'm going to apply is it's not supposed to be elevated. And I need a second item, condition set, that defines from which set of conditions we accept input, which in this case is the predefined PS framework environment item. Applied. And that worked. Now, if I go ahead, grab that line, go to my elevated console and try running that, same thing. For that, I first need to import the action, the custom action that we defined, and I'm going to run that. Okay. Condition not met. I'll need to look into why the warning did not display text. There should have been text that explains what's going wrong. So new update coming in, but still the hello action would not run because it's not because it's running elevated, and we told it to, well, not be elevated. So how do the filter conditions actually work? We do have filter conditions themselves. They are specified by module and name, and we have filter condition sets, which combine them into a rule set that you can use. So PS Framework has a condition set named environment, where all of the environment specific items are inside. So this allows you to avoid unsupported conditions in your filter if you only support a specific set. So how do we do that? Let's create a completely new item in this case, because we can use the same filter thing also to validate objects. And let's say I have the most noble brew here. And it's in the bar. Not PSMD, PSF filter. It expects expression. Filter, mouse don't fail me now. Spin up the beer. Now I can evaluate the beer. Yeah, that's nice. It just has no idea what actually this expression means, because neither in bar or is code exist. We're creating a new filter condition set. And we have we provide the logic here. And the same thing again for this code. We've got the condition set, and we can now assign this fire. And now that whole evaluation should work slightly more smoothly. Okay, I do appreciate the console is failing me here with the results. We do get the correct result here before it kicks in. I'm just going to grab this whole thing into a console that is not going to mess with me. All right, the first evaluation failed. If we do the second one, it's going to run just fine. It's what the hell is happening here today with me? Demo gods, I very much appreciate your messing around with me. Let's change that to code. And now the VM standard. So I kind of had to build another toy, and since I already had it available and environment-specific inclusions or exclusions seemed like the kind of thing to do, if I don't have to pay the development cost again for it, at least. I went with that. Only limitation, not every filter condition needs input. And for the pipelines, it only works without input. Because the pipeline doesn't have any specific object to pass to the condition. And we just check, are we on the support operating system? Do we have the environment that we need to run this action, or do we not have that? All right, that is fundamentally everything that I have implemented so far in this in the system, the whole feature set. Any questions?
If you have questions, feel free to type them in. And as somebody mentioned, even though the demo gods were conspiring against you, you persevered. It was great.
Thanks.
So yeah, I like the new PS filter condition set with the conditions inside the script block. It's like it's a nice little domain specific language. I like that approach. So I'm interested to see how you implemented that. I'm going to take a look. Anyway, so I don't see anybody have any questions at the moment. So if that's all you have, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, Fred. And really good to have you come on and walk through this stuff. A lot of food for thought for me. I'm going to be checking it out and trying to build some things and take it for a run. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Around that system itself, not really. I can fill in a few more snippets and things, but I think we have about 3 more minutes, right?
Yeah,
that
sure.
Is actually just enough to give us a very small teaser.
Sounds good, please.
Because I just shipped a new module. That is all about having fun with Azure. Specifically, we are deprecating the Azure AD and MS Online module. They have an end of life by the end of this year. And well, there's a lot of scripts out there still using them. Among other things, well, we don't really have a full mapping for every single command of the Graph API yet. So you really literally have no choice about it so far. But there is also a lot of still plain migratable legacy code that we just have no reason to migrate, didn't get around to migrate. Whatever, for whatever reason, we still have lots of Azure AD and MS Online lying around. And well, it's time to migrate them. It's not really automatable, but you have usually a significant set of scripts. Many of them you haven't touched for years, like set up a scheduled task and forget about it. I mean, that's why we do scripting, so we don't have to deal with the bloody thing every single day. And yeah, so we now have lots of scripts. We don't know exactly which of them we need to touch. We don't really know what we need to do with them. So what can we do about that? I'm just going to grab a few commands. I do hope that one works. Whatever, this needs to be enough for demo purposes.
And just as a note, Dan in the chat said that your logging system in PS Framework is genius. So just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you. And while we're on that topic, an update is coming to that soonish. We will be a bit more flexible about a few of the logins, for example, picking exactly which properties to write to Azure Log Analytics or the SQL Server table. It's been stalled for quite a bit since I've been, quite frankly, overloaded with too many other things, but it's in the pipeline. Just need to do some more testing and it's ready. It will be ready to roll. All right, we have a new command called read AC script file, and it's going to grab all the files that are piped to it, and it's going to tell us what we need to do about it. With the exact file, with the line number, what command we have, what we should be using instead, any known issues with converting it, like the /all the parameter being a switch parameter in Graph, but it is not so in get Azure AD user, which means in get Azure AD I would have been forced to do something like this. And this will tell us exactly in which file, in which line to change things. We can technically, I do have a command that will automatically rename them. The problem is virtually every single command requires manual intervention anyway. So I can just convert that to the new notation, but you will not be getting the same structured objects. You will not be able to use the same input parameters. You will not process the values in the same way. You might not get all of the data you're expecting. Some of the commands are split into multiple commands. Some of them don't exist yet, and you need raw API calls. So this is still very much a work in progress, and I cannot recommend doing the bulk conversion unless you already have that prepared somewhere. For that, I'm now going to do something that I'm going to need to do anyway. I'm going to grab some weird module some guy wrote.
Hey, that's a cool module. Somebody just mentioned in the chat also multi-threaded logging. What else needs to be said?
Thanks. All right, we get the results, and I'm going to export Excel that into report.xlsix. That should now give me the report. II invoke item opens the specified item in the default application for that.
Wow, that's pretty sweet.
And that's okay. What we can see here is that actually I'm trimming things in the before-after notation that I don't include the parameters. But of that, I've now got the report, and once I have that report, it is decently safe to accelerate it if I already know that I'm going to migrate that by hand and I want to get a start help on that. It's still telling you this is dangerous. Do you really, really want to do it? Because it's not going to work just by running it. But now they're using graph commands instead.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
And you also get a report from all of the items that you did. So it did not catch the object, but it would theoretically support figuring out where exactly things went wrong. We do have a what if, of course, of that, where it would just tell us what it's going to do. And I can grab the results. Yes, I really want. And for example, I can access all of the messages that were generated. Or I do have a list of all of the individual results.
So I was going to ask, under the covers, are you using tokenization for parsing or the AST or both?
I'm using AST. I do the PS Azure Migration Advisor is a very lightweight wrapper around an actual infrastructure project called Refactor that I wrote before that. Refactor provides tooling around an extensible tooling around parsing and processing a script. We do have, for example, read array script command, and it will go and parse out all of the commands in a given script. Let me grab a bit more something reasonable. Let's grab the action that had me have so much fun. I can have that parsed out and I get every single command that's being used inside of that script. with a lot of metadata, including, of course, the AST, which includes the extent, which includes the start line number. And I suppose while I'm on the topic, I might as well demo that one. No, not that one. Code, GitHub, refactor, test files. There we go. It finds all of the items parameters. Of course, this one is not quite correct. Let's take a look at the file that I just run. Here's the dir that the command found. So we have 3 parameters: country, company name, and who. And it detected that based on the splatting. So I'm resolving also all the splats that I can safely resolve. We've got another command here, set Azure AD user. In the meantime, we messed a lot around with the $param. And it still found quite a few of them, including, for example, male nickname, which was parsed out from this add command. On the other hand, we do use some dynamic expressions here where we literally have no way to know which of them is actually, what value are we going to receive. So for set Azure AD user, it has found a few parameters that we know are in use, but we also don't know that we have all of them.
Does it, do you handle comments as well? Like inline help?
Comments are not visible in the AST.
Yeah, so, okay. I was wondering if you might have.
I am planning on adding a token for that, a plugin. This whole scanning aspect is again plugin based, so you can implement your own scanning plugin and conversion plugin. And I am planning to implement one for the help system. That's going to work by inferral, by figuring out where's the start offset of the command, where's the start offset of the individual parameters, where exactly do we have all of the comments, comment text in the original code based on where the individual non-comments are, which is, yeah, going to be a pain in the ass, and it's going to take some time until I'll be able to make the time for that. I did it once, I don't want to do it again.
Yes. That's why I was asking you, because I don't want to do it at all. So
yeah,
awesome.
I do have one command that does it for parameter comment-based help, but it accepts, for example, that inline help inside of the parent block itself rather than above it through default comment-based help. It accepts that it's not going to do that.
Gotcha, gotcha.
The new infrastructure is going to enable me a lot better to do that, because I now don't need to custom implement my entire parsing searching engine. I just need to figure out how I'm going to generate my tokens and what I want to do with them. So I've cut down the overhead for new features by about 75%.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you. That was a great great add-ons right there. I really appreciate it. All right. So I don't think I see any questions. Good to wrap up.
Yep.
Great. So I'll post this video, and Fred, I'll just reach out to you. Maybe give me a couple of links for your GitHub and a couple of these things, and it'll be in the README section in the when I post the YouTube video. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. Special thanks to Fred, and hopefully we can have you back again and talk about all the new features and the new stuff that you add to your awesome modules.
Trust me, it's very simple to get me to brag about my features. Just reach out to me.
Perfect. So are you going to be in the US at all? Are you going to come for the conference here?
No, I'm going to come to the